Hey,
Streaming
we're back,
live.
y'all. Welcome back to Redneck Gone Green. Definitely appreciate your patience with us as we come on. We're waiting for Tamah Israel to join us. In the meantime, just a reminder that what you're watching is ordinary folk who are telling the truth best we can with the tools that we have available to us. Shane, you made a point. I love that phrase. You want to repeat what you just said to me just before we went live, if you remember it?
Yeah, let's see. It was kind of off the cuff. I said, we learn as we go, and that's the only way to grow.
We learn as we go, and it's the only way to grow. And I'll tell you this, I tell people all the time that it's going to take ordinary people rolling up our sleeves and doing the work that needs to be done. Ain't nobody going to do it for us. So if you were listening to my voice, whether it's live or a recording after the fact, or if you're watching us on video, just remember that this movement is composed and comprised of ordinary people just like you. Shane and I both grew up in ordinary, like our redneck credentials are chef's kiss impeccable, right? I
I
grew up
believe
in
so.
a house without a flush toilet. I carried a 5-gallon bucket of my family's excrement and poured it into a hole in the ground. And I don't say that to try to get any accolades or sympathy. I'm just here to tell you my worldview has been shaped by the world that I lived in. And so my hatred of capitalism is not merely intellectual, it is a lived experience of understanding what it means to have a boot on my neck. And Shane, I know that, and that was in rural Texas, but my mama's people from Louisiana and Mississippi, which makes us kind of cousins, doesn't it?
We probably are.
Because where'd you grow up, son?
I born in New Orleans, grew up in Mississippi, the wild, wild swamps of Southwest Mississippi.
And of course, we've got our good friend Kali Akuno at Cooperation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi. So we've got multiple ways that we intersect for sure, right? And so what I'm getting at is, Shane went on, and your background is kind of interesting, Shane, because you had a circuitous route to democracy at work, didn't you?
Man, yeah, I sure have. I've been, let's see, well, growing up the poor son of a preacher in rural Mississippi and finding myself at the United States Naval Academy and then spending time as a U.S. Marine and then lived in Dallas, Texas, running my own car shop. And things weren't going right. Found myself back in school, finished that, wound up in advertising, and landed in New York City. Here I am.
And here you are indeed. And here again is Tamah Israel, who is joining us. Tamah, thank you so much for your patience with us and for sticking with us as you come in to Redneck Gone Green. So I'm just going to formally welcome you back to Redneck Gone Green.
I'm so grateful to be back in the conversation. I'm glad we were able to overcome the technical glitches and regroup. So grateful to
And
be
here we are. So looky here. The first thing I'm going to do, y'all, is just a reminder that we use the phrase solidarity economy, but in plain language, that just means an economy that's organized around cooperation, care, democracy, and shared abundance. It means that we have basically put workers in charge of not only ownership but decision making, that we incorporate mutual aid, not mere charity, not capitalism with a kinder face, but actually community stewardship and control of our resources. So to set the expectation, today we're going to be talking with Tamah about the solidarity economy, not merely as an abstract idea, although we definitely hold that vision, but we're going to be talking to people who are doing it in actual practice. So before we jump into that, Tamah, I want to open up the space for you to how you became a movement organizer. So I'm going to give you as much space as you want to tell your own personal story about who you are and how your political awareness developed.
Thank you. Wow. Much like most superhero stories, um, this work comes out of like dealing with my own personal experience with trauma in the workplace, and just dealing with corporate greed. I am a daughter of Elizabeth and William, who are from Birmingham, Alabama. My grandfather was a coal miner in Birmingham, Alabama. So I made my way to New Orleans because my husband is a musician. But just going back in time a little bit, my mother was a bus driver in Birmingham City Schools. And I lost my mother to a car accident. And what I didn't know is that my mother was driving a vehicle that had a defective fuel line in it. And so, just, as with most, we experience loss, we experience hardship, we experience a lot of things due to like capitalistic and corporate greed. And so, in this, she transitioned in 2007, but in 2008, of course, we know what happened. The automobile industry got a big bailout, and so unfortunately, the lawsuit and the things that we had to try to make these people who had these products pay, it got dropped. We weren't able to get anything in regarding my mother's death. But the biggest loss was not being able to hold them accountable, and just really they continue to keep doing the same old thing. And so for me, I do this work because so many people continue to get hurt. Um, so many people tend to not find safety. So many people tend to not be able to meet their basic needs. And so I personally have been in a space of like really wanting to work for my own safety and security, but I know I'm not the only one. So the work that I do is to benefit all people who are living in the same situation that I'm in. We go to work every day. We work under harsh conditions, and the challenges we face in the workforce alone is a traumatizing experience, let alone the additional harms that we experience through defective products, corporations not being held accountable for the things that they create, and the ways they create environmental damages and harm. And just to go even a step further backwards, my grandfather, who was a coal miner in Birmingham, Alabama, he had epilepsy. And needless to say, that came from working in mines that didn't have OSHA as a part of their protocols back in that day. So this work comes out of like true experience with corporate greed, to say the least.
Well, Tamah, I thank you so much for the courage of your candor and your clarity, because for me, it's really important that we understand that the intersection between capitalist exploitation of workers, the white supremacy of subjugating Black folks and brown folks, the heteropatriarchy, and the empire, again, as Dr. King said, these triple evils of militarism, capitalism, and racism, they cannot be separated, and they should not be separated. Instead, they should be dismantled, and we should create a new system. And remember, y'all, workers produce. Ordinary people have the ability, not only the right, but we have the responsibility to recreate these systems. And I tell people all the time that as hard as it may be to imagine creating a new system, it's worth noting that this system was created by humans. Anything that's been created by humans can be dismantled and recreated. And I make a commitment that I don't want to just talk about a racially just, economically fair, ecologically sustainable society. I want to live in one. And you know what, y'all? That's my birthright, and it's your birthright too. And it is these predatory, greedy capitalists who have stolen from us. And we are going to have to work together to recreate that. So, Tamah, as you were telling your own story, it really lifted up for me how similar it was, your own history and my history. And I'm also going to ask you, like, because you and I have had some conversations, and I'm going to ask you, I know that you and I both work for nonprofits, so we're not denigrating nonprofits, but we've also had some conversation about the limits of nonprofits. We both agree that we have to engage in electoral politics, but that's also not enough. So what's interesting to me as I think about your movement work is both very immediate, it's also relational, and it's long term. And I'm just wondering, how do you hold all of that together as you think about the work you do on the day to day?
I think to me, I see a larger vision of like what a solidarity economy can do for us. And so I see all the pieces working hand in hand. And so, as you know, I'm also a cultural worker. I work for a nonprofit. And I just want to like hone in on the nonprofit sector for just a moment because, while well intended, nonprofits are there to do the work that the government, the public agencies don't do for us. The challenge we face is, and it became very visible in 2025, the attack on the nonprofit sector, and especially in the cooperative space, where nonprofits really depended on funding from the USDA. So our farmers were attacked last year. So just knowing that there's a direct tie still to the federal system and that the funding mechanisms that help keep nonprofits, quote unquote, stable, we experienced that destabilization last year. And so our reality of it is, if we're going to use mechanisms like nonprofits, we have to build more mutually organized nonprofit mechanisms that really match the work that's happening boots on the ground in the community. The historical tendency has been for nonprofits to arise out of national organizations that they have these large pocket people that run the nonprofits. And so I think that my approach to working in the nonprofit space and the nonprofits that I've worked with is been more self-directed by the people who are informing why the nonprofit exists in the community. We have organized with Cooperation New Orleans. We've organized ourselves as a worker self-directed nonprofit. So we're basically the people in the community. We are that community and we represent that community. So we created a table for us to work democratically with each other so that we can leverage resources, so that we can leverage some of the benefits that nonprofits reap, but really to do the as you call it, the boots on the ground work, from mutual aid circles, from helping to make sure when crisis management is something that we definitely experience here in New Orleans, that we can mobilize resources to tend to those things in the most emergent moments. And in those worker self-directed models, you are subverting the bureaucracy of having a singular leadership that can't move fast enough, or bottlenecks in leadership. So I tend to like nonprofit models that aren't so by the box, if you will. And so I think creating non-traditional models is the way that I set the container for the work that I hold.
So thank you so much, Tamah. You did not disappoint at all. I know I sort of put a lot of different things in front of you, and you weaved such a beautiful tapestry together. I do, and I'm really glad that you landed it specifically with Cooperation New Orleans as a worker-directed or worker self-directed nonprofit. So it's a unique kind of thing. And I know that y'all first began forming sometime around 2000. Is that right?
2019, I was on the board of the food co-op and just landing out of that space, and wanted to see how could cooperatives really be used inside of New Orleans to create more equity and fairness in the economy.
And so I do want to just help people to understand that. So 2019, Tamah and others coming out of a food co-op were in conversation. And then y'all launched, what, in 2002? Is that right?
2020, we actually launched. Oh, so for the food co-op, yes, was established in 2005.
2005.
Yeah, they originally planned to open in that year, but because of Katrina, of course, was a challenging year. Things couldn't come back as the way it had planned. So in 2008, the food co-op actually opened. It was a necessity for it to open at that point because we had food apartheid more aggressively in New Orleans post-Katrina.
And that's the point that I was really kind of getting to, is that you and the folks that really were the architects, the visionaries for Cooperation New Orleans had been, I know, inspired by Cooperation Jackson and other efforts, right? But y'all were already thinking like this. Hurricane Katrina hits and basically wipes out New Orleans as we currently understand it, right? And so I just think it's really, I want to lift up and anchor the fact that y'all did not go away. You did not let the developer class just sweep y'all aside. Instead, you used the idea of this disaster and the food apartheid that you were experiencing and said, we gonna do something about this ourselves. And praise the sun sign says food apartheid is a more accurate way to describe the food desert situation in the US. So Tamah, you getting love in the comments section for your articulation. And so I wanted to really anchor that your mutual aid work and your co-op work, it's the same work.
It's the same thing. I mean, it people tend to want to put things in whatever boxes that they want to create for tools and systems of survival. But at the root of cooperative economic thought, the root of cooperative economic practice is a shared and common interest. And mutualism is that way that we are putting our efforts together to meet our needs. And this isn't a new technology. And I want to give some folks some credit for the food apartheid word that I use. I want to lift up LaDonna Sanders Redmond for her work of really discovering a new terminology of a food apartheid. And then also I want to lift up Amaha Selassie out in Dayton, Ohio, for the work that they've done in Cooperation Dayton and Gem City Market. But those are also very perfect examples of people organizing around a mutual need. And so the mutual aid organizing that came out of New Orleans in a post-Katrina New Orleans was a phenomenal thing, and it was out of necessity. And so I really want to lift out, like, historically speaking, as we talk about, and today being MLK Day, at the root and the core of what MLK was advocating for was economic justice. And mutual aid and the economy work hand in hand because someone has flipped the script on us, making the economic practices that we actually subscribe to not for the people and by the people, but work of mutual aid and cooperative organizing recenters our economy to be one that's a caring economy for the people and not an economy that sits on top of us. So yeah, I really appreciate you like landing it in that way. They go hand in hand.
They do. And before we go further, and trust me, we are going to go further, I want to take a moment to underscore for me why food apartheid is a more accurate term than what I was first exposed to, which are food deserts. And that's because a desert is a natural occurring phenomenon on Mother Earth. And it suggests that it's natural and some sort of accidental lack of food. Whereas apartheid highlights the very intentional, systemic, and racialized policies that deliberately create unequal access to healthy food. I'm talking about redlining, discriminatory zoning, economic exclusion. The white supremacy is not just merely a concept, it is a system that is in place. So apartheid acknowledges that these inequitable food environments are built systems, not just naturally occurring. So I really appreciate, again, that you lifted up the folks who helped to develop that. And I'm going to say, I have learned to call it food apartheid because of people like Tamah and Amaha and others who helped me to see words matter. I know that. Mm-hmm. And so as I forget, was it Angela Walker who said, do your best. And when you know better,
do better.
Do better, right? So that's what I'm trying to do. So on that tip, I do want to underscore that Cooperation New Orleans is in a movement infrastructure that also, in addition to food, is also doing both mutual aid, and y'all are helping to incubate worker-owned cooperatives as well. So I want to sort of give you an opportunity to talk about the cooperatives that you're developing and the approach that y'all are taking there.
Right. And I appreciate that. And as I shared, we organized Cooperation New Orleans in 2019 and just want to highlight what was happening. We had the Fight for 15, which was centered around, making a living wage, at the very least $15 an hour, which New Orleans is one of those places where workers' rights aren't front and centered. And so we had many issues that was coming out of the workers' rights realm when we started organizing. And it's, me coming from the food co-op, my friend John Calhoun, I want to name a few other folks, Shan, Susan, Sally. These are all folks who have been in the work around building cooperative and advocating for cooperatives in New Orleans. And then we had our good friend Toya, who was actually directly working with the Workers' Rights Center. And so all of these great minds sat at a table together, and we really dove into what would it look like for us to have an economy that's generated by the people who are the force of that economy, which is the workforce. And so we look for examples of worker-owned co-ops in our city. Very few, not really any examples in our city. And so it was really important for us to actually start and help incubate a project, to prototype it so that folks can actually see that this economic model is not only one that we've known about historically, but it works today. And so our very first project that we did get funding for through Seed Commons, and I'll share a little bit more about that shortly, was Pagoda Cafe. And what we did with that group of people is work with them from the very beginning of the owner who heard about us and saw it as a great opportunity to keep people employed, is to convert her restaurant, her single owned restaurant, into a worker cooperative. So I want to give a shout out to Shanna May, who actually was the first innovator to see that converting her business to a worker-owned co-op in this city was the thing to do in a really volatile time in this space because of COVID. And so we work with them from understanding what it means to be business owners, folks who had not owned a business before. Some had, but many did not. And then they actually learned those principles, what it means to own it together. And we work with them. They bought the business from their owner. They purchased the assets that go with that business. So they are now not only business owners, but property owners. So it's really about the whole picture. How do we create a space for the whole person to be well cared for and actually do do the type of production that meets their own individual needs?
And what I love about this description, Tamah, that you're describing is it really does show Cooperation Humboldt at that strategic intersection between both crisis and construction. It is resist and build in practice, and it is a very strategic orientation. And I do want to ask you, in what manner and to what extent do y'all incorporate political education into the very direct solidarity work and mutual aid that you work, or do you? I mean, do y'all have that integration into political education into the work?
We couldn't do it without it. This work would not exist without political education, because first of all, we got to know who our allies are in this work. And really to build allyship is to do the political education work and developing a shared understanding of the issues. And for that reason, we developed the Black Liberation Co-op Academy, which is one of the mechanisms is that we really use to dissect what is the problem. The problem is capitalistic and racialized capitalism at that, but capitalistic business practices that continue to make it difficult for workers to have a fair wage or even meet their basic needs, and some not even getting work. And then it also breaks down the praxis of Black liberation and really looks at the ways that Black liberation has been sought after, worked towards, and achieved in the United States. And also, what does it look like for us to continue this work in this day through building shared business practices or even co-designing our community? So it's a whole, it's deeply embedded in the work that we do. And as a matter of fact, it was important for us as stewards of this work to be properly educated. So part of what we did in our past and what we're moving back towards is when we learn something, we teach it together, like teach it back to each other. And so having spaces where we're communing, we're organizing with each other, and learning how to understand the whole thing that has us in this place today has been an ongoing plight. We can't go on without it. We have to
I
have
love it. And I'm reminded of what Ruthie has taught me. Ruthie is a formal educator about the zone of proximal learning. But what I understand what you've just described is the pedagogy, right? That we all, like popular education means that we are all teachers, but we are also all learners. So the how you learn something is just as important as what you learn. And I really want to underscore, at least for me, when I talk about political education, what I'm talking about is really understanding the way the system is currently operating is by design. It is by design that exploitation, oppression, and racism happens. It is in order for the predatory class to extract the surplus value of our labor. They do this on purpose, and they divide us on race, on gender, on spirituality and religion. They do this on purpose. And I'll just say, for me, I have completely embraced that political education has got to not only help people come to see that, but also come into a consciousness about the fact that we have to unite our class together to recognize that there is a historic role that we can and must play to dismantle capitalism and create this solidarity economy. The kind of theoretical understanding of the contradictions of this current society, but also the active struggle to say, as we create a new one, it's not enough to merely create little pockets of cooperation New Orleans or cooperation Jackson or Cooperation Vermont or the Wellspring Cooperative. I go on. There are so many examples. Many of them have been guests here on cooperation, here on Redneck Gone Green. But the point I'm making is we've got to thread those together into a new political economy. And for me, that's really where the rubber meets the road. And I know Michael, who is a frequent viewer and listener of Redneck Gone Green, and I reckon Michael Nugent is familiar to you. Michael asked, do we have a preference between getting existing businesses to convert to co-ops or starting new co-ops from scratch? So I'm going to invite you to reflect and react to that as an incubator, and then I'll share my own thoughts. But I'm going to turn that really astute question over to you first.
Yes, I really, really appreciate these questions. And I want to say, just at the root of it, creating co-ops, whether they're conversion or new, is hard. I don't want to sugarcoat it because there's a lot of frou-frou, rose-colored glass coating of cooperative models. And I just want to really, really lift out that in both threads, whether it's a brand new one or one that you're converting, the whole thing that we're having to do is convert people's mindsets over to be able to do the work of governing collectively. And in either case, that mindset shift is still a challenge. So do I have a preference over one over the other? I think it depends on the needs of the individuals who are forming the cooperative. My personal preference is that the people who are creating cooperatives are meeting their needs. And cooperatives exist to meet the needs of those members and the communities that they serve. Pagoda was a 2-year process. And I also want to lift out, I created a cooperative myself, and it was a 2-year process. So just to really just be transparent, I don't have a preference. I think I do have a preference of a process in the cooperative development mechanism. And I think that shared learning is a really critical first step for folks who are building in like what it means to be in a shared decision-making capacity, working together to achieve an isolated goal. That takes work, and it takes people getting into practice of it, because we've been taught through branding, through marketing, a deep sense of individualism and the work that we have to overcome in building shared enterprises and being in community together or communals, whatever you want to do, is that mindset shift to being on one accord and being there for a shared goal. So one or the other, I don't have a preference, but my rationale is mostly strategic around people doing the mindset shift that they need to make in order to make the cooperative work.
Oh, Tamah, once again, just so astute, so brilliant. And I love how you break it down without dumbing it down, right? Like you have real talk with people, but in language that, at least for me, is very accessible. And Shane, I'm remembering that, I know that the partnership that the People's Network for Land and Liberation had with Democracy at Work and the Worker Co-op Academy that we did, and you came in and did some co-teaching with us on that. And one of the things I tell people all the time, remember that a worker-owned cooperative business, the noun is business, right? Like at the end of the day, you've got to be creating a good or service that can be sold. Like you don't want to become just dependent on charitable donations in order to try to lift up a business. So the worker-owned cooperative is the adjective, but it still has to produce a good or service. And as part of that, doing that good or service, the trick is that, as Tamah says, in this society, we have been trained that individualism also shows up this way, y'all. That there is always somebody who has power over you, or you have power over them. It is very rare in this society that there has been spaces for intentional, deliberate power with mechanisms. And that can get messy, especially because we're all damaged by this racist, sexist, class oppressive society. We've all got our own things to work through, and we're going to have to work through them together. So Michael, your question I thought was an astute one, astute because we are living at the beginning of a silver tsunami. That is to say that so many millennials and before their parents, the baby boomers who created businesses, are aging out. Their children often do not want to inherit it. So there are a lot of businesses that are available to convert into worker owner cooperatives. Other individuals want to create a business and are very interested in learning about co-ops. But here's the thing. We have to teach ourselves and each other how to think like owners, not employees. That's the key to me, Tamah. It's like if you are actually an owner and a co-owner with other co-owners, that's the spirit of the collective. And it's not like, how to say this, I don't want to take away from it, but I also want to be real. It's not like just because you become a co-op that you have a kumbaya moment and everybody is going to all of a sudden get along, right? We still bring our own damages and our own virtues and vices into all of it. So the process that Tamah has said is, to me, the very key. So we need to produce goods and services. We need to do it within this capitalist market to create niches, but ultimately those niches have to confederate together so that we're creating supply and value chains that have taken the exploitive profit motive out and put into it meeting human needs.
Indeed.
That's very well said, David.
Well, thank you, Shane. And I'm again, this is a little tease to the Redneck Gone Green community, because remember, y'all, we are on the Democracy at Work platform. That's the main one, and the partnership that we at Redneck Gone Green have with Democracy at Work. I mean, we wouldn't be on reaching so many people but for that. And of course, Tamah, we're running out of time, so I do want to just talk a little bit about the three of us are all part of something called Resist and Build, which is actually to say, stop the harms and abuses where we can, as best we can, but also build those alternatives and trying to build a national network around it. So I'm going to ask you, Tamah, to describe in your own words what you think about what Resist and Build is, and why neither resistance alone or alternatives alone, without confronting power, why they have to be done together.
Yes, indeed. And I really appreciate like the whole mechanism of resist and build, because it creates a whole community model. And it speaks directly to that last comment that I was just thinking about in terms of, meeting the needs of people. The whole resist and build network is thinking about community safety, is thinking about what's after this capitalistic economy, is thinking about what are the systems and the things that are needed in order to transition from that economy. So it's really the whole vehicle in by which we as a people can collaborate and organize our energies and our thoughts. And those of us who have specialties to serve in a capacity to create a solidarity economy. And it does look like putting up resistances against those systems that cause harm, like what we're seeing right now. There are a lot of harmful orders that are given and taking place that people are literally dying. And so what does it look like for us to build a holistic community and have practices that allow for us to keep people safe, like during the Underground Railroad and many of the historical movements? So Resist and Build is a modern day prototype of those movements that is designed for people to come together and jointly create a new system.
Tamah, once again, you're just so on point, and you deliver with such common sense, but also such profound insight. And I want to ask you, as we come to the end of this show, for you, Tamah Yisrael, who is doing the work on the ground, a culture worker, a community organizer, working locally, but also nationally, as you look out there in the world, where are you deriving your hope? And not the diluted like pie in the sky, but what are you looking at that's giving you confidence that we can do this?
I think that we as a people are waking up to the reality that we have more power than we have traditionally been told we have. And the energies that I'm seeing in movements like Resist and Build, in Cooperation New Orleans, and in my own household with my grandchildren is really the thing that keeps me going. And just the reality that once people figure it out that they have had it the whole time, we can actually pull our creativity and our productivity together to carve the way for a new future. I do not believe that what we're experiencing is our inevitable fate. We as a people have the ability to make something different. We just got to put it together and make it happen.
I love it. One of my great mentors, Jerome Scott, who's going to be back on this program, he signs off every one of his emails with "Make it happen," which reminds me that, who was it? I think it was Andy Warhol, who had a famous quip that I really love. He said, people say time changes everything, but it's not really true. You actually have to change things yourselves, right? So we can't just sort of wait. It's not like an inevitable thing that we just wait until things happen. We're going to have to do it ourselves. And the good news is we can do it. That people just like us before ended slavery. People like us before built an organized labor movement. People like us built a new society. We can do it too. And I want to remind you that the systems that we're fighting against will not collapse on their own. but neither will the world we're building be built without us. So we're going to have to dismantle this racist, sexist, class oppressive society and build new alternatives. And Tamah Yisrael and her colleagues at Cooperation New Orleans are doing just that. Tamah, before we let you go, I want to give you an opportunity for any closing thoughts, as well as how can people follow your work?
Oh, I appreciate this. People can visit coopnola.org to stay tuned. We are in the process, through the brilliance of one of our stewards in Cooperation New Orleans, Maya Penn, are holding what we call co-op kikis on Wednesdays at Pagoda Cafe at noon. So if you want to tap in and come kiki with us while you're in New Orleans, you could do that. You can also visit me at tamahyisrael.life. That's Tamah Yisrael with a Y in front of the Israel. And
you have to spell that whole thing for us. I want to make sure we get it right.
It's Tamah, TamahYisrael.life, TamahYisrael.life. And you can follow me there. But coopnola.org, that's COOPNOLA.org.
Thank you so much, Tamah Yisrael. I want to thank you specifically as our guest. I also, of course, want to thank Ruthie Engelke and Shane Knight for being part of the Redneck Gone Green team. But most importantly, I want to thank you, the viewer listener, whether you're watching us or listening to us live right now, or you are listening to a recording. Remember that this community is growing. We're getting larger, stronger, and better organized with every single broadcast. I can't tell you how exciting it is for me every time I see another subscriber, whether you're a free subscriber or you come on making a small donation to keep this thing going. I just want to say thank you for being part of this. And I want to let y'all know that we do this every week. And next Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, our guest is going to be Matthew Slatz. Matthew Slatz is one of the co-founders of the statewide Virginia Solidarity Economy Network. He's also one of the key lead organizers of the implementation plan for a participatory budgeting project that's happening in Richmond, Virginia. So what I'm getting at, y'all, is another example of somebody doing the work on the ground. And in the meantime, I want to say again, one more time, thank you. Keep on keeping on. Can't stop, won't stop. Peace, y'all.